Do you ever listen in to the noise that's coming from your back brain? For most of us, it's just a constant stream of negativity. You're gonna fail, it's not gonna work, the promotion's not gonna come through, he doesn't love you anymore, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're just not enough. Psychologist Russ Harris calls this radio doom and gloom. It's broadcasting all day, but they're not feel-good hits, they're insults, they're shaming words, they're predictions of calamity. In many ways, these thoughts and cognitive processes are the mind's attempt to help us learn, to remind you of what's important, to try and protect you from future pain. But like an overly helpful friend, this constant attempt to help is actually getting in the way and making things worse. So what do we do with these thoughts? Well, what most of us do is we try and argue with them. But our negative thinking always has a counter-argument. This back and forth, it'll go on forever. Or we just try and push them away. Joe, stop thinking about this. But if I tell you not to think about an elephant, well, you just thought of an elephant, didn't you? So what if I told you the answer wasn't to try and argue with yourself or to try and just suppress the thoughts, but instead, freedom could be found in actually accepting those thoughts. My name's Joe, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor and also an ordained Christian minister. So my perspective on these topics is shaped by a worldview that says God cares about you and the way you engage this brain He's given you. The concepts in this video are taken from a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy called ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And for a deeper dive into these concepts, I highly recommend a book called The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. So we just accept the negative thoughts? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that they're just thoughts, and we can't do a whole lot to prevent intrusive negative thoughts. What we can do is just let them come and go as opposed to struggling with them. But also no in the sense that we don't accept them as true or predictive. They're just thoughts. And if we can stop struggling against them and instead just let them come and go, we'll have a lot more time and energy to focus on what we want to do and who we want to be. Now, the simplest way to do this is doing something I talked about in another video, just naming them. I am having the thought that. I am experiencing the feeling of. Just in the act of naming the thought and feeling, we're moving from the back brain to the front brain. We're unhooking from those thoughts and feelings that are kind of tossing us around. But I want to give you another exercise to try that many of my clients have had success with. And this again is from Russ Harris. We call this naming the story. When you start to hear radio doom and gloom playing in the back brain, see if you can identify the familiar story that it's telling. If you start to pay attention, you'll realize there are a few common stories of doom and gloom that are particular to your back brain radio based on your life story and what you've been through. Maybe it's the story of how you're going to fail at everything you do. Maybe it's the story of how you're going to be alone. Nobody loves you. Maybe it's the story of how everyone's going to find out who you really are and then they won't want anything to do with you anymore. Maybe it's the I'm so stupid story or the I'm damaged goods story. Whatever the common stories are for you, get good at identifying them. This is the first step. Identify the doom and gloom story your mind is telling you. The second step is to actually take a moment to put words to this. You can do this using internal speech, or if you're alone or you just don't care what people around you are thinking about you, you can say it out loud. This is what it sounds like. Oh, that's my not good enough story again. Thanks, mind. I know you're trying to help, but I've got this covered. Or, oh yeah, that's the old you're gonna fail epically story. Thanks, mind. I know you're just trying to help, but I've got this covered. Or, oh, this is the one about how I'm going to be a disappointment to my family. Thanks, mind. I know you're trying to help, but I've got it from here. What's happening in an exercise like this is you're practicing using your front brain to notice the negative narrative rather than that narrative taking control of you and jerking you around. In practicing noticing the narrative, you're able to unhook from it. And then when you're unhooked from it, You're able to focus on what's important to you. Loving your spouse, working hard on that project, telling your kids how proud you are of them. You see, when thoughts and feelings and stories from our back brain, when they grab a hold of us and they toss us around, it's like our thoughts are holding us captive. And there's a well-known verse in the Bible that tells us to do the opposite. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, the Apostle Paul says, take every thought captive. Now, he can't mean erase the thought. We now know enough about the brain to know that that's not possible. We also know that he can't mean suppress those thoughts. It's been proven that this just makes things worse. I think the key to this verse is the very next phrase. Take every thought captive to obey Christ. To obey Christ. When Christians don't obey Christ, when we don't live in the direction of how we know we're called to live, which of course is very common for us, when we don't live out of a sense of knowing that in Christ God delights in us, it's in part because those thoughts, those troubling thoughts in the back brain have actually hooked us and they're tossing us around. They're holding us captive. What if instead our thoughts were made subservient to what we know we're made for? And for Christians, that's living out the love of God towards loving Him and loving others. So next time radio doom and gloom is playing, instead of trying to get in some unending argument with yourself, instead of trying to suppress those troubling thoughts and feelings and stories, try just acknowledging them. Oh, this is that old story. Thanks, mind. And then focusing in on what God has for you right in front of you. See you in the next one.